You're tuning in to Wellfound's Ask a Recruiter, where we sit down with recruiters to share their advice on the hiring process. Hey everyone, I'm going to start just by introducing the topic and how this session is going to work. My name is Rachel. I'm from the product support team here at Wellfound. Today's Ask a Recruiter Q&A is our first panel that we've run. We've got three lovely speakers here with us today: Ruthie Goodell from Buoy Software, Zaharo Tsekouras, founder of Right Hand Talent and co-founder of Conscious Talent, and Virginia B. Hillman, a recruiting independent consultant. I'm going to talk a little bit more about their background and experience in just a bit while people roll in for the conversation. But the topic we're going to be handling today is bridging the gap, hiring team expectations versus market reality. So how do we manage the differences between a market and what hiring managers are looking for and asking recruiters for? Before we get started, I'm just going to talk about how this is going to go. So we're starting off with 5 questions that are based on the intake survey that we had from when you signed up from the session. So you might not see your exact question verbatim, but it's based on the questions that we received. We had a lot of overlapping themes that we've collated into those 5 questions. While we're asking the questions, please ask any additional questions that come up for you in the chat. I'm not going to ask them out right away. I'm going to ask them when we get to the live questions section, but it should help us follow up on anything you're keen to learn more about. And if you can indicate whether or not you want to read them out loud or if you'd like me to ask them out loud for you. I love to hear people's voices on these calls. So while we're in the live Q&A, you can also use the hand raise tool in Zoom. It's the little wave icon. And that can indicate to me that you'd like to ask a question out loud, and I'll call upon you to do that. And then the last thing is just a small note to please be respectful. Our guest speakers have been really generous with their time, and also we're a community, so please be thoughtful with the length and also the theme of the questions that you're asking during the session. And just a brief note about Wellfound. I'll talk a little bit more at the end about some of the tools that are available to recruiters, but we're a jobs marketplace that have specialized in tech hiring for over 10 years. We were formerly called AngelList Talent. We've made over 8 million matches, 150,000 tech jobs are in our system, and we have over 10 million startup-ready candidates. So if you don't know about Wellfound, if you joined us through a LinkedIn post or anything like that, I just want to make sure you know who Wellfound is, who's presenting this webinar. So down to the good stuff. Really excited to have these 3 women in tech talk to our community. So Ruthie Goodell has led recruiting efforts at high growth companies, including Wellfound. She's a former Wellfound employee, and Interfolio, where she achieved a 257% increase in qualified resumes and built comprehensive talent acquisition strategies. So we're really happy to have her here with us. We also have Zaharo Tsekouras. She founded Right Hand Talent, a search firm specializing in placing chief of staff, product and tech talent roles, and co-founded Conscious Talent, the world's first talent partner connecting high performance executives with companies that value both career excellence and deep inner work. So really excited to have her here with us because she's placed some of those really difficult executive roles for companies and should have a lot of talking points on this. And then we've got Virginia B. Hillman, a recruiting independent consultant and former senior recruiter at Intuit and Workday, with a track record of technical recruiting success, achieving 95 to 100% offer acceptance rates, which is such a great metric. So thank you all for being here with us. Awesome. So I'll just get started by asking our first question. This question is something I'm sure we can all relate to, the unicorn hunt problem. So how do you manage hiring teams' expectations when job descriptions ask for unicorn candidates? So those with niche skill sets, maybe they're also looking and have low salary requirements and immediate availability. So what are some of the ways that we've handled this?
I'm happy to go first.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone, Zaharo. Yeah, so we've worked a lot of these kind of unicorn searches, and before I'd give out any advice to anyone, I'd want to actually default to the stories and the things, the scars that we've earned in the trenches of some of these searches, and kind of share what's worked well for us, and then you can take from that what you think works for you. But yeah, usually we go into these initial kind of prospecting calls or even kickoff calls for searches with the job description in hand. And just a quick scan of that, usually the red flags will pop out around like the salary mismatch to, let's say, the total years of experience, or the skill set that probably won't be in the few years of experience that they're looking for. So it's kind of like looking for the contrast in a couple of different parameters in a job description. Immediate availability is probably less of a concern. I think that there's ample talent out there that's ready to make a move. It's just a matter of like finding those that have all the feathers in the cap that you're looking for. And my MO here is just being really transparent where I think the failure modes of a search could be. And sometimes that is saying, hey, based on, these past 5, 10, 20 searches we've done for this role, your ideal candidate is probably not going to be in the 130 to 150 range on the base. They're probably be closer to 150 to 175. And the reason I know that is because we gave that advice to a client up front. We did the search anyways. We got a 90% kind of rejection rate from the market, complaining about the salary being too low. And then they kind of reevaluated who they needed. We went out and, finished in 3 weeks, right? So the pivots that happen as a result of being open to the market feedback and the expertise of, let's say, an external recruiter, can help things move along and, kind of align expectations better.
Yeah. And kind of piggybacking on that, almost starting from like, what is the end goal of this position? Are there certain metrics that they need to be able to hit, or things that they need to be able to achieve in this position, and kind of working backwards to the job to then get to the job description. I think at a lot of companies, we recycle job descriptions and they don't always get updated. So even if you're hiring for a senior software engineer and you've hired a bunch of them, that role can change over, the course of a couple of years with the growth of the company, with different positions that you've added, different resources to alleviate some different areas. So really just asking additional questions throughout that initial conversation, as she was saying, like the kickoff call, to really kind of hone in and ask a little bit deeper to get to what maybe that end goal might be. For example, we've hired, or over the course of the last 5 years, I've hired multiple engineering managers, and some companies prefer them to be part like a player coach role, or somebody who's completely hands off the code, but more of like a people manager. And so again, those roles can change. So asking deeper questions, but also trying to figure out what their end goal is for that specific position will help us have more success with kind of weeding things out.
I have to say that my two counterparts here definitely hit the nail on this. I proceed to ask my favorite word/question, which is why. Gotta understand where people are coming from, right? Everyone has a reason why they think a certain way, and then you can reverse engineer a problem by starting always with why. Why, with empathy, earns you the keys to whatever relationship you need to earn. I have taken a ton of clients ever since 2020. I am a serial, agency of one. And that's what has gotten me the referrals that I've had in over the years, right? For example, in my tenure at Workday, I had to do master data management roles for the first time in my life. And I was thrown in at it, right, with no training and no experience. So once I was given always the most difficult ones as someone who was thinking outside of the box, the first thing is why with empathy. It's understanding why this role is happening, where the problem is, and why is it taking so long. Then reframing problems by doing deep research, right? I always run a benchmark of salaries because you got to stay equitable and attractive. I love to do a skills availability heat map, which is just, layman's terms for a market analysis, where I run this job description and the talents and see what's going on in similar companies to see if maybe this needs to be split into 2 roles. Maybe the job description is completely outdated, as Ruthie said, or maybe this is a conversation that needs to be done more with changing the title. Maybe it's more of a senior title, but it is an individual contributor, and that's where the role is taking longer, right? I also like to map the skills that are scarce versus common, and kind of split it in a word bubble when I'm presenting. So once I do these things, I kind of like provide a visual clarity to my client or my hiring manager of what's going on, and we kind of go from there together. And we're going on the same line. Earning that hiring manager and making sure you show improve and educating them, it's what gets you the relationship to go smoother and faster. And I pivot every single week. I'm doing this exercise because I want to make sure I stay within 21 days. That's my sweet spot, right? I have hired product analysts in 7 days or 10 days before because of this formula, right? It never really changes, and you gotta keep that like library active. Of course, showing prioritization in the requirements and explaining what we need to rank in group A, group B, or group C on nice haves and must to haves. I do it in groups. And of course, at the end of the day, things are never going to be perfect in your relationship. So you start pivoting into offering alternative talent strategies, right?
Mhm.
I start talent pooling. I start maybe pivoting towards a contractor or a consultant bridge where someone can start as that. If we start going a little bit longer on the rec to see if the relationship can be defined as two partners, and maybe that will solve the problem of why we haven't found a purple squirrel, which I do not like that word. I think that everyone is wonderful in their own way, and they bring attributes with their own transferable skills. That's my favorite part of my job, selling transferable skills. So having said all of the above, I create that phase hiring plan, and that's how I execute, right? It's very strong in relationships and education that goes both way, and empathy more than anything, because I think that's my secret sauce as a consultant and what has gotten me clients over the years.
Just to also piggyback on that, one thing when I was working with Wellfound directly, one of the things I love that we do, or we were trying to message a little bit more about, was empathy on the candidate side as well. Like in being real, sometimes it takes the hiring manager to have to go through the process with a couple of candidates to really kind of hone in and see in real life, like what that looks like for them. And so unfortunately, that does sometimes make the process a little bit lengthier, or, takes a couple more interviews. And, we try to make it the best experience for the candidate as possible across all of these companies. But being real, it sometimes that does happen. And so know that we're doing our best on our side to really make this process go as quickly as possible and to be as seamless as possible. But we are also fighting some battles that candidates might not be able to see on their side. But at the end of the day, we're trying to make it best for both sides. But it does, unfortunately, sometimes take a really kind of a test or a trial run to really get those points into some of these hiring managers as well.
Right. And then just one more thing is, as Ruthie says, which I couldn't have said it better, it's we are working to establish a relationship in educating a hiring manager. In my first master data management role, it took me 72 days because nobody wanted to work in the role, and they gave it to me. And my hiring manager was extremely reluctant to change it. He was incredibly stubborn, and I had to make a presentation to the VP and the COO of the company. I had to escalate it and even involve an HR person until I did that as very lengthy analysis. We were able to split the role into two and also make sure that we reinvented the structure of the team and the compensation. So when you see a role open for 104 days and 72 days, it's not that we're dropping the ball. It's that we're really, at the end of the day, trying to advocate for you, the candidate, to make sure that your experience and you come in the right transparent position, and you don't last 30 days on the role because you're burnt out or you feel that there's no direction. We want you to also walk into something that is for you, and it's streamlined and it sets you for success. So I'd rather sit on something than bring someone and set them for failure.
Exactly. Great. Well said.
Wow, I'm really excited to share that with candidates, actually, because they get really frustrated with the lengthy times that they see, and to know that there's someone advocating on the other end, I think, is a really wonderful thing to be able to share.
Sometimes it's not you, it's truly us. Like we're trying our best on this side here.
Yeah, and we advocate, right? I took this profession because I wanted more women that sound like me and look like me to have a seat at the table. And also, I want every person to have a seat at the table. And for that, I have to sit, advocate, and set people for success, because you're leaving your job and you're leaving your livelihood. And a lot of us live paycheck to paycheck. So I would hate for you to come to a job where you're going to leave in 30 days and you're going to be unemployed for 3 months, right? So I'd rather just advocate for you to come to the best situation possible. And I even transferred the data that I collected when I interviewed to set up the onboarding process to the next 90 days, because we hold the data as recruiters and we can set that person for success for the years to come.
Well said.
Very cool. Okay, so I'm gonna present our next question, which actually kind of speaks to what we were just talking about sort of speed and the cadence of these things. So when hiring timelines are compressed, but approvals are slow or inconsistent, how do you keep the process efficient without sacrificing quality? And it sounds like, there are some sacrifices along the way. So what do you pick and choose during this process to focus on or value?
Would you mind if I go first?
No.
Okay. So I start with alignment. I get everyone pulling, trying to get everyone pulled in the same direction as much as possible, right? Identifying the real bottlenecks. My favorite saying is I'm always identifying the solution as opposed to the problem. So we will hear the problem, but we will not really dwell on it. Let's aim for a solution, right? I'm here to, and it's always with support. I'm here to support. I'm here to hold everyone together, and I'm here to make sure that I provide the best answer possible, right? Because as recruiters, we're really program managers and we're aiming for success as a program manager, right? If you look at the design thinking structure, we will have to always think with design managers to make sure, again, that this design thinking wheel is, running well oiled. Try to aim for acceleration, parallelize whenever possible. I am a risky recruiter. That means that I will try to parallel and do maybe a few sprints of the interview process in one day and make sure that I'm very clear and transparent with the candidate that if they don't get it, it's better for them to find out quicker if it's someone who's entertaining another offer. And I'll take the risk. I'll talk to my hiring managers and I tend to convince them. And both parties have never been upset so far, knock on wood. Make sure that I pre-screen everyone as much as I can. Make sure that I'm prepping both ways. And also making sure that I'm fast tracking the forces, right? Making sure that if I see that there's someone who's interviewing in the process that is a little bit weaker, is doing a lot of rejections on my candidates, that they get coached. I make sure that I'm setting time aside to constantly coaching my hiring managers and assigning them buddies too. I always make sure that the vice presidents of operations and the TPMs are my best friends where I go because it will tell me who can be a best bud to train this person and to make sure we set them for success. Because let's face it, none of us went to college to learn how to be stellar hiring managers or interviewers. And that's my favorite thing to do is to make sure that people walk out empowered to bring the best talent possible, right? And having said that, I want to make sure I'm always keeping up with the scorecards, giving that white glove communication, because at the end of the day, as recruiters, we want to aim for a passive pull that it's only done with stellar branding. So we're aiming for that great branding with quality checkpoints, right? And making sure that everything is done in a way where people walk out excited and enthused and they want to really go and join our team. So it's on us to provide that experience. So that's a little bit of what I do with that speed versus quality dilemma. And also, on the sourcing side, I try to always get the headcount ahead of time on my quarterly meetings, sneak on my team's meetings as well. I'm the queen of pushing with my vice presidents of the divisions. I mean, like, hey, can I please attend this call? I want to make sure that I know how we're doing budget to see what jobs I need to prioritize, campaigns, marketing, talk to social media. You have to make sure that you're doing all of these things in strategically thinking of how you're going to bet against the cows in getting that talent, right? Getting the people to want to apply as opposed to you spending your time sourcing. And the word of mouth is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, the way I read this question, because I'm coming from agency side versus in-house. I know, Virginia, you've had experience kind of on both sides of the table. The way I read this is when hiring timelines are compressed, but feedback is slow or inconsistent. How do we keep the process efficient? I think that slow and inconsistent is totally incompatible with a compressed hiring timeline because the loop, it's iterative in the beginning of a search process, especially if there's even a shred of ambiguity or question marks around who's the candidate that we're really looking for this role. That could totally sideline a search by weeks and actually could totally just derail it completely or suspend it, right? Until there's essentially, for lack of a better word, a come to Jesus moment where you get people in the room and you're like, hey, we're failing and here's why. And so as the external recruiter, if we sense that there's just not a real commitment to the process, which requires some basic service level agreement of we'll review candidates within 24 hours, you'll get feedback within 48 hours or what have you, then then we kind of back off from the search, right? We want to spend time on the searches where we're going to be successful, our candidate's going to get placed, our client's going to be happy. And if the client can't meet us halfway, then we need to focus on other searches that we're also running, right? So, and then I would say on the other point, so yeah, you can't really run an efficient process if you don't have fast and consistent feedback. And then you never want to you don't ever want to sacrifice quality. I do think that speed without precision is really bad. Because in that case, you're just looking at activity and that doesn't equal an outcome at the end of the day. And so my preference is, like, for example, if we're on a really tough search and it's hard to find the candidates, we would rather have fewer submissions of candidates to the client for review, and share what we're seeing along the way in terms of feedback from the market. Here's why people are not answering our emails, or answering the emails or DM or message or what have you, and this is why they're rejecting, then waste their time with candidates that are not on target and actually don't meet the bar that we've pre-agreed to help them hold and raise in terms of, you know, the candidates that they see from us. So yeah, a couple of things going on in this question, but those are my 2 cents.
I also want to piggyback on that to say one of the best things that came out of my experience with Wellfound, like working as an employee there, was they really changed the game in terms of the transparency within the interview process. And I think I was able to kind of take that with me to Buoy, and hopefully, you know, from here on out. But I think one of the best things was like a what to expect document, sharing that with the candidate to say, here's what you can expect from our interview process. There should be no surprises. We've got our ducks in a row. So we're sharing that with you to hold ourselves accountable. And I think taking that even a step further, and, you know, this is not without, you know, learning from certain failures throughout the process, but even adding to that to say, you know, we're gonna we strive to get back to you within 72 hours, or, you know, really kind of outlining exactly what this candidate can expect from our process. We're trying our best here. It's not to say that there aren't battles otherwise, but trying to at least set that bar, that really does kind of put a little bit more pressure on the hiring managers and the internal staff to say, okay, this is what we've shared with the candidate. This is what they're expecting. And so we really want to stay to it as much as possible. However, working at startups, and we each have, you know, differing experience, whether it be the agency life or big company, and now consultant. And, you know, now I've built recruiting from the ground up at 3 different startups, and things can happen in the drop of a hat. And so really, and I think to the agency life comment, it was, you know, we really want to be able to stop the process or pause it and communicate that to the candidate if we foresee something happening that might prolong the experience by even 2 weeks. You know, I think sharing with the candidate to say, you know what, we're going to pause this for a second. We've got some internal things happening. We're really excited about you. We hope to, you know, be able to reach back out to you. But if we do foresee things coming, to the best of our ability, sharing that with the candidate as often as we can is really going to be important. But I think one of the best things was that Wellfound really set that external transparency bar really, really high. And I've absolutely loved that. And I'm taking that everywhere.
I love what you said about transparency and boundaries, because you have to have the fine line between, like Zaharo said, quality and speed, but also how you really establish that with your client. And you set that great expectation with your candidate is setting the boundaries with the client and providing a clear expectation, and also maybe recycling and referring, right? Like that candidate can go to like another colleague, maybe a post you've seen on LinkedIn, and that's you just want to make sure that everyone gets set for success, regardless of where they land, right? And so like that can be a lesson learned for the company as well. That's the sweet spot of being a consultant, is that you can set that, and then you can, you know, you get respected that way, they learn that way, and it's a lesson learned for all of us, right? So that actually, like, it has happened a few times personally, and I think a lot of times it's been for the best. So thank you for sharing that.
And the startup life, I mean, really, things can happen. And so sharing that with candidates, and hopefully, you know, I guess in this new market that this new candidate market that we're experiencing, candidates are coming from all sorts of size companies, and especially on a platform like Wellfound, they're applying to positions and company sizes that maybe they've never worked at before. And so making those adjustments to, and especially by us being able to be as transparent as we can, setting those expectations so that they know maybe this isn't the process of Facebook, but we're doing our best over here and things are going to happen. And if you get hired, things are going to happen in your role. And so just help, like, bear with us, and you know, keep reaching out to us if we, you know, if that's what you prefer. But we're going to do our best to set those expectations, to say we're going to reach out in 72 hours from each conversation or things like that. Will definitely help with the candidate.
I love that. I feel like, you know, all of you have said at least something about this idea of setting expectations before the process even starts to keep people aligned, like whether it's with the people you're hiring for or with the candidates. And even just like, seems like it's almost a contract that sort of overarches the process to keep people on pace. So that's a really good takeaway. Okay, great. So the next question we have is about a little bit of a market reality check. So how do you balance market compensation data with internal pressures around budget and leveling, especially when hiring managers are pushing for top tier pedigree or North Star talent? So, you know, the question's really about like when those things are a little bit out of alignment, how do you have those conversations, and like what different things do you use to get people on the same page and make those fits?
I think I experienced this a lot through using a platform like Wellfound. One, it's nice that there's transparency to show hiring managers this is what candidates are making, but also setting expectations with founders and hiring managers from the platform to say, while you might not be able to pay this person and you're hoping that they'll take equity and other things, you know, let's have a conversation about it. If you think they're going to go full equity and sacrifice a large part of their salary to be able to work for you, we can try our best to find that. If we don't, we're going to need to start, you know, making some adjustments. So keeping that conversation open and constantly checking in with the hiring manager or founders is really going to be important in that. But I've seen that a lot more in like the earlier startups. I think when you get to like the 50 to 150 plus employees, it starts to level out a little bit, and we can sort of have a little bit more say in that and set those expectations through data. But especially in the earlier stages, that can be a really hard conversation. So transparency, data, but also, again, might be trial and error too.
Mm-hmm.
I would say there are definitely like A players, let's call them like North Star talent at every level. So I think the key word here is level. I think what happens in searches is, you know, candidates kind of exist on this spectrum, and there's the top talent within the bracket at that leveling, like the budget at a specific leveling, and then there's the candidate that's one level above in terms of seniority and experience, but they're still kind of like, they want to kind of regress to this like other like lower budget, and it's like that doesn't jive, and so that's where like there's potentially a red flag. But yeah, I think companies might hire for a head of marketing a couple of times, right, throughout their growth trajectory. There might be a recruiter out there that all they're doing is head of marketing, though, just like us. Like most of our searches are chief of staff searches, so we have like the direct pulse on the market. We're talking to hundreds of candidates a month on this role. Like we know what the compensation is for someone who has, you know, 5 years of experience, like 2 of those being at McKinsey, and then they exited to a seed stage startup and got promoted, you know, and left to go join a Series A startup, and they have like 3 years of ops experience in San Francisco, right? We have that data point. And so I think just being really transparent, communicating what you're seeing on the front lines as like responses to outbound or, you know, past data points, I think is always really, really important to do upfront.
I echo what both Ruthie and Zaharo say. We have the pulse. We understand what a profile would be probably asking for when it's selected. So we provide that, hey, this might be coming your way to the hiring manager even before we start, screening them. So we can understand, if the band, if salary band or the budget is high or low, and if a company, the earlier a company is, I would say that the more influence we can have, and then we can, then there's escalations and things that you need to do with a bigger company. But I think as an agency, or in a consultant, we hold that data. And that's something that we can always provide, right? And we can start building the more accurate profile of a candidate from the get-go that way. But also we can influence the way that leadership looks at salary. We also can, providing that is key, that, like Zahara said, that top level talent, and like especially like how to select it and how to understand what their needs will be. Ruthie mentioned something about, also equity that always plays a huge part as a company gets bigger. So that's something that we will play out, right, to our advantage sometimes. And the candidates love it when they understand they're going to a company where they can profit from that long term. So it is all about creating that relationship on both ends, which is educating the candidate on what is the expectation, but also educating leadership and educating, everyone involved in the process, or of what to expect given a budget that they're giving us. And if it's not flexible, then we need to zoom in even more on the type of profile, so that way they don't waste their time going for someone that they know they cannot afford in some instances, right? So I think that that's a value that someone who works with a lot of people simultaneously like us can provide. And also Wellfound is great because I had used Wellfound before, even when it was in Joe.co, when it came to giving those parameters, and that really helped me build salary payments for a lot of clients, because I also have built startups, from the ground up, and I had to be involved with the compensation bands, right, in the budgets, and evaluate them every step of the way. So I'm really, really thankful for entities like Wellfound, where we can just provide those cheat sheets and not spend too much time sometimes doing the research, right? So we can focus on candidates.
Well, and at startups, you're going to get hiring managers who don't have much experience, and maybe they listen to us and maybe they don't. And if the range seems a little low from what you might be trying to persuade them on, or trying to build more budget for it, and set better expectations internally, sometimes you just have to post it as it is with their, if they're unwilling to budge, and really show them through that experience of not getting a lot of candidates to say, this is unfortunately where your parameters are. If we can increase that a little bit, let's see what the market then pulls, or how many applicants we might get. Sometimes they just need to actually see it, to experience it, and you're doing your best to persuade them one way or another. But sometimes they just have to experience it too, and you're going to find that a lot too at startups, especially.
Part of that expectation versus boundaries relationship. It's a fine dance that you have to learn how to maneuver.
Yes.
Sounds like the data, good and bad, empowers some of this communication between hiring managers and recruiters. Awesome. Really insightful answers there. So the next question that I have, and I might skip the second one after this so that we can get to some live questions. Let's see how it goes, just so that the people on the call have a chance to ask some questions out loud. This is our first panel, so I'm like judging the timing. But this question is about surfacing good candidates. And it came from a question from Heather, who may or may not be here, just about, they had recently posted a job with over 300 applicants, and they found that all of those 300 applicants basically weren't qualified for the role, and that some people had really enhanced their resumes, maybe duplicitously. And I think we're in a different time with AI tools helping candidates build out some of their applicant materials. So what strategies have worked for surfacing qualified candidates, especially in roles where you're flooded with hundreds of unqualified applicants?
Well, another kudos to Wellfound, because before I actually worked at Wellfound, I was using Wellfound very heavily to source candidates. I know that doesn't really touch on the applications, because, sometimes as a recruiter, you just get so frustrated with that quality of candidate being so low coming in through applications, that I actually found that sourcing candidates through platforms like Wellfound and LinkedIn, I have a higher success rate of actually making that higher. But I think another thing yeah, I'll stop there for a second. I'll let the others answer for time's sake, but I think it's really helpful to have other sourcing platforms when you do get frustrated. But I'll let them touch on more of that.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think, yeah, so culture is really important, understanding your own story and your values as a company, and being really authentic in your communication, your ownership and your communication of those values and that culture in the job description, because that's where candidates are going to spend like a good amount of time. Like, yeah, they'll go on your website. Obviously, maybe the website's even more bare bones for the earlier stage companies. And so a lot can get communicated through a job description or maybe a Notion deck or something like that. And we've run some really interesting searches where we actually took pen to paper on the entirety of the job description. And I can give example of like two searches that couldn't have been any more different from each other. One search was for a venture firm whose partners were extremely committed to inner work, consciousness exploration, expansion, their own understanding of reality, and bringing people onto the team who were also on board with those values, and kind of had them kind of were orienting around those core values and how they lived their lives and how they showed up at work. And I said, I made the recommendation, we need to woo max, like be very woo-woo in, in the job description, because we want to make sure we're filtering in candidates who really resonate with the message and the values that you are embodying as people on the team, and then by extension at the company, the firm. And we also want to filter out for people who are just like, I don't really get what this is all about, not for me, right? On the other end of the spectrum, we work with a hedge fund for like a top 1% hedge fund founder who was so extreme and said, no vacation for 2 years, working 16 hours a day. I mean, like a total opposite end of the spectrum. I'm not saying one is like right or wrong, but I took the same approach with him, and I said, we need to really like highlight this and lead with and like lean into that if that's what you're all about. And that LinkedIn post went viral on X like a couple days later, because some big account like retweeted it, and it just did its thing. And the applicants that we got for that role were so strong, like 10 times stronger than like any other regular job posting we might have had up for other roles. And I think it's because the message was so authentic. Even if it rubbed some people the wrong way, it rubbed the right people totally in the right way. And they self-selected in, and they were so enthusiastic. And then the other part of that was like, we had really good questions on the application, like open-ended questions. And so they were optional. People who didn't respond were automatically screened out, because that's just like lack of effort. And then we were looking at, how did people respond? How are they kind of sharing their story, and how that opportunity resonated with them? And, it was kind of like mirror image, you had candidates that were all in on both searches as applicants. And so the more I think a company can define, embody, espouse those values and that culture, the more it's going to resonate with the right people, and you're going to not waste time with the wrong people and spend more time with the right people. And I think that on the flip side, I've been a part of searches, and I've heard stories where things were kind of kept from candidates until like maybe midway in the process, like, oh, like we work 70-hour weeks. Actually, we're on site 6 days a week in San Francisco instead of 5 days. And it's like, wow, that we should be sharing that stuff up front, So yeah, those are some of my stories.
Okay, well, I have a few things that I always like to keep in mind when I'm starting these conversations when these types of specific situations. Number one, marry volume with selectivity, right? So high volume tactics don't have to mean low quality outcomes if you're combining that precision intake with a proactive sourcing, right? Make sure you're setting that expectation. Make sure that everything that you can think of that you can add and you can learn from that intake. You're editing that job description constantly, because there will be, like Zahara said, some very out there like clients that really need like a niche person. So you need to continually add things onto the job description and continuously attack at it. Also add specific questions, add specific, exercises, or maybe even make them watch a video and see what resonated with them, which I had a client send a personal YouTube video as a founder of what he believes in. And it was send me a paragraph of why you agree or why you disagree. Right. And it was how you answered it. And it wasn't exactly what you answered. And that was the ones that won were the ones that had like a 50-50 split on disagreement, because they needed opinionated people that would be able to push the envelope and question and grow, right? So when it comes to these types of job descriptions, you have to like kind of like be on that dance, be surgical about what goes on the JD, as quiz as you may, enough the creativity, and activate that passive network, right? Activate your own network, recycle people that that you added onto your LinkedIn from your journey. Make sure you're constantly posting you're constantly posting in groups of interest with your own secret sauce and notes that you have taken. I truly believe in constantly measuring and reinventing these job descriptions under this level, just because I know that I have to communicate what's holding up the line, right? I have to communicate what's unreasonable and what's not reasonable. Sometimes it's by teaching them a lesson and keeping the job description going by pausing it. But I think that, doing that tailored approach and doing that communicational approach and being creative, adding questions and making sure that you're constantly editing and attacking that job description with these types of, specific types of candidates, when you're flooded with these hundreds of applications now with AI, it's super pivotal, right? So I do rely on those types of filtering effects, if you will. But there is nothing worse than having the people that spray and pray, that like you're seeing like over the hundreds of applications in your company, and you're like, oh my gosh, you are, I don't know, XYZ background and it will not work, right? So I digress, but it's been really great to be able to just, learn how to use Boolean searches and learn how to, use Control F, and then constantly attacking the job description and getting creative. It's like psychology applications to recruiting, and it's kept it interesting for me. So
one thing to add to that is that now having kind of built the sort of employer branding side at a couple of these startups, just piggybacking on Zahara, one of the most successful things is to add to the job description has been the 30, 60, 90-day expectations. People love that. I think I had it mentioned like 1 out of every 5 at minimum. And so that was really helping them understand kind of what would that first 90 days look like. And that allowed for them to also comment within their application, here's where I could be successful. Here's where I aligned with that. So that's one specific example. The other thing I thought Wellfound did an awesome job with was also putting out an employee handbook and sharing that publicly. And that was another thing that candidates hadn't always seen or don't always get access to before, they become an employee. And so that just setting that level of transparency, and that was specific to Wellfound. They were, they are super transparent, and that's part of their culture. So as Zahara said, to really kind of hone in on your own culture. But those are 2 specific examples that were really successful, especially with Buoy not having we have a website, but it's not, it's like a landing page. So, so having the job description and these other documents to link out to is really helpful when candidates are looking into us to even see how legit we might be.
oh my God, Ruthie, that was amazing. I could have not said better.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. And
Oh,
go ahead. Just one more point, since we're on the topic of job descriptions, something else that I really love to see in JDs is, the type of person that would work here, and then it's like the type of person that wouldn't be a fit here. And the would not be a fit here or would not, succeed, I think is really an interesting kind of take to have on there, because I mean, humans, we're like hardwired to win, but we're also like really, really averse to loss. And so looking at it from that lens, where it's like we might have an aversion to something we see on the who might not be a fit here, that kind of helps us move in the right direction, like towards opportunities that are meant for us, and maybe passing on the ones that aren't.
So even all of this takes a lot more time upfront. But again, as to their points over the last couple of questions, it's going to make you more successful, hopefully, in the screening process and the application, reviewing applications as well. So it's worth the effort, but hopefully it pays off, as it has for us.
And get as creative as you can be, because I think what Zaharo said and what Ruthie said and what I said too with the video responses, like be as creative as possible. People actually appreciate that. And yes, why you would not be a fit, even going as far as that, that some people would find controversial, it's so helpful because it is clear and it establishes a relationship from the get-go about transparency and honesty, and more people appreciate it.
Oh yeah, for sure. All three of you have me so energized right now about this. It's making me think of a couple of things. One is that Amit did this Why We're Here interview with the founder of Rootly, and he actually has like people he's screening get on calls with people who have left the company to like tell them what it's really like there. And it's sort of speaking to what you're talking about, Zaharo, about like that like raw transparency might actually limit some of the applicants that you get, but maybe in a good way in this market right now to make sure that you get the right people. So I just thought that was interesting. Oh, that was our last question, which is great. So I would love to get to some live questions if anybody has them that's in the audience right now. Hopefully you're as energized as I am hearing all these responses. I don't have any questions yet in the chat, but that doesn't mean there aren't any. And I can also pull from our intake form too. So if anyone has a question, you can use the hand raise or you can write in the chat. I'll just wait a moment.
And one thing I have to say is we all will walk out of this conversation thinking about stuff. I know I speak for my colleagues. Our virtual door will always personally be open to answer anything, because sometimes we say more things, right? And the questions come later.
Definitely. We do have one question from Masha. Masha, do you want to ask it out loud? I can also ask for you.
Sure. Right. So, management is very interested in using the latest technology, and the latest technology those days is AI. So, what is your opinion? What is your experience in using AI to screen resumes? Because internet is full of people moaning the advent of AI on both sides. As a recruiter, as a candidates, they feel that they're being rejected without a human looking at their resumes, and also recruiters like don't generally love those AI tools. Like I personally don't think they are a good replacement. I still see that I'm doing better just looking at the resume rather than using those tools, unless maybe the tool I'm using is not a good one.
Yeah, I think I'll answer. Obviously, moving fast in agency recruiting is the name of the game. Hopefully, speed with precision. We don't use AI to screen resumes at all. And I think where my kind of like approach has been honed there is in doing a lot of chief of staff searches. This candidate archetype can be so broad, company to company, founder to founder. I mean, the skill sets, the years of experience, the combination of years of experience. Maybe they're a past founder. Maybe they came up through investment banking and then exit into an ops or rev ops role or what have you. We can't rely on AI to be able to pattern match as we see it, right? Because the right candidate can look very different within the same search, because we kind of even push the envelope on what we think could be a great fit based on what our client has described to us. Like we'll definitely present them who they think they need, but we'll also push the envelope and say, we think you should look at these candidates over here that might not fit neatly in the box you've defined or at all even. We've had clients say, I want a technical chief of staff, full stop, period, won't look at anyone else. And we said, okay, but you need to talk to this one person who is incredible and can do what you need them to do, which is faithfully interpret, across tech teams and biz ops teams. And they ended up hiring that candidate. And so we would not be able to do that if we didn't take a really close lens to what they actually need, and then trying to pattern match that with candidates who show up in our network and who we headhunt for this role. And being able to identify, because that's in that specific case, that candidate surfaced through a separate search. And when I spoke to her, I said, well, you need to talk to these guys over here. And that's how that match was made. So yeah, we don't use AI screening in that part of the process. I think where AI has helped us is when we're doing, for example, we did a CFO search and we spoke to every single executive on the team one-on-one, me, a recruiter, and the C-level employee. And we learned so many things about the CEO and, what he needed in his CFO that we were then able to kind of like consolidate notes, like anonymize basically, and determine like, okay, here are the things that have really have been repeated like 4 or 5 times across different team members. That clearly has come up as like the #1 need. And as we evaluate candidates, because we use the kickoff call or calls to determine what questions we ask in the interview, because we customize the questions based on what our clients need. We don't have a cookie cutter template for evaluating candidates because every search is so specific. And we want to make sure like we're checking all those boxes. So long-winded answer to kind of have a short response of we don't use AI to screen, but useful in other ways.
I would say that no one tool should be the decision factor. Like you really have to look at every part, resume, LinkedIn, all these different things, portfolio. There's so many things. Like one tool should not be the end all be all. I think for the most part, at least. Also with like healthcare tech, we have a lot of security parameters with using AI. So we're not allowed to incorporate that at all, even for note taking. So it is a little bit of an unfortunate, that is a great opportunity for, consolidation and to summarize and so many other great things. But Buoy, with especially being a healthcare company, has a lot of like very specific audit related security issues. So we don't use it specifically. And that's just us. So, but otherwise, there's a lot of great benefits, but I don't think any one tool should be the end all be all.
I just to echo the sentiment, and I agree. I like a medley of tools, but the influencer saying that you are going to get caught up on the AI and it's going to pick up that I'm AI. Hello, my name is AI. I'm the one who's running the specific searches and the Boolean combinations and the filters. And then I have to read it and I have to read again and I have to put them in groups, like I said earlier in the conversation. The only tool that I have been having to enforce, especially with early talent, and that has been a request and agreement from my clients, is humanize that me, because a lot of prefabricated resumes and cover letters that might just like completely gets like loses the essence or the secret sauce of my candidate to the point of like not being authentic. Well, I have to use that to make sure that I'm really going to speak with someone that knows what they're doing or someone who just made it up, right? So if I get like a 75 or a 70, or a 60, well, that's someone that I might not push through. I want to hear like authenticity, and people speaking uniquely and in their own way. So of course I use that because I've noticed a pattern, right? But everything else, it's done by me. And so far so good. So I intend to keep it that way unless I find a tool that can help me, do better filters and kind of like help me think better when it comes to, creating that funnel.
I think what's been so energizing is to hear, my fellow panelists be so humanizing in this whole process. I think that's what we bring to our specific recruiting processes, and really what makes us successful is that component to it. So I've really loved hearing that, that they are not using it as much as like what other companies may be using, and that they're really kind of bringing their own flair and finding the gems, those hidden gems. And I think that's going to be what makes the company successful and the candidate successful too.
And also, I personally like to advocate for the little guy. So when I see potential, and I see especially someone, and I can tell by their LinkedIn of experiences or posts they're made about having it hard, like when it comes to searching, you best believe I'm grabbing that person with the job jumping stigma. I'm grabbing them and I'm speaking with them and I'm picking up the phone and I'm coaching them and I'm wanting to advocate for them because I know that people have been suffering the most. And that's the people that I want to fight for to make sure that they're in their forever home or their long-term home and they can really more focus on being creative and being amazing at what they do as opposed to the instability of constantly surging, constantly living through contracts. So that's personal my personal fight that I like to bring to the table.
Definitely. We're almost at our end, and it's just kind of a funny segue because I was going to talk a little bit about our Wellfound AI tool. And I think it's actually a really good segue because our tool really functions as a way to like help recruiters with their sourcing, but it doesn't take over. It's not like something that's automating everything. It's something that you control to help you highlight the things you really care about. So for example, and actually I wanted to say that not for anyone who's on this call right now, but I've actually used Wellfound AI to help me find
Yeah,
speakers for these. Yeah, and Ruthie has too. But I helped it help me surface speakers for Ask a Recruiter by using our smart criteria in order to like ask it like find people who've had public speaking engagements or had any experience teaching or anything like that. So it really functions as a way of sourcing where you get to choose what criteria is there for you. And I think that is like one of its smartest tools that it has. I'm just gonna talk about super briefly just because this, just to let you know that it exists, it's new. It's something you can sign in and just actually try and see if it works for you. And then it also includes like some automated email sequencing. So again, this is like completely matched to your tone, your timing and cadence that you choose, but it helps you speed up all those processes, all the ways that I'm sure all of us are using AI in our day-to-day lives. It's built into the system. It's got clever ways of doing it that maybe you haven't thought of before in order to like help with your sourcing and outreach. So definitely take a look if you want. And I've got Audrey here on the call, and you can book a call with her if you want to just like have someone walk you through a demo. Alejandro's gonna post the Calendly into the chat here too, if that's something that interests you. Ruthie,
Can I say I actually got to do a little test run with it and I really enjoyed it. I thought it really, again, it's not the end all be all. It really allowed for me to control that search, very similar to, other platforms, but even more honed in, but it also didn't fully weed people out either. So again, I could like reset and expand again. And so I really enjoyed using that tool, even in a test run. So just throwing out kudos to that.
yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I think it's worth just like signing in and trying it out. I don't know, Audrey, if you have anything to add or just want to say hello.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you all so much. This was incredibly informative, and appreciate everybody's time today. And yeah, I think just to echo what everybody, love this GIF, by the way. Just to echo what everybody's or what Ruthie and Rachel had mentioned, I think with Wellfound AI, it's not there to sort of replace you necessarily. It's there as a supplement, a great tool to increase your sort of like recruiting efforts or make your recruiting efforts hopefully a little bit easier.
Well, and also when they don't, in the absence of a recruiter, allowing for, the hiring manager, the founder to be able to use it in a way that we would use it. And it's really easy for them. That I found to be a really good experience, even though I'm a recruiter. Putting my founder hat on to think about that experience was really good.
For sure. And yeah, I just want to take this time to like thank all three of you. I learned so much on this call. I'm really excited to share it widely with our network. And I'm just like so impressed with how you all brought different aspects of your expertise to field these questions. It was really interesting to hear about your different perspectives and just all the thought and care you put into it. Thank you so much, Virginia, Ruthie, and Zaharo. Really appreciate it. And I've just, we've dropped a survey into the chat. This is our first recruiter panel. I know Actually, I feel like the cadence went really well, but like I'd love some feedback on just sort of like what recruiters are looking for as far as resources, product education, education on just like recruiting in tech in general. And it's also a way of signing up for future webinars and to keep you on the mailing list. So if you have the chance, please fill it out. I will be sending over a recorded video of this and like some follow-up resources. If anyone, Virginia, Ruthie, or Zaharo want us to share any specific resources, I'm happy to place that in there too. So just send me a message. And then the last thing is just that we've got a Discord channel. It's kind of newly launched, but if you want to join, you can join in there. Mostly candidates are in there now, but we'll be building it out with more recruiter resources. Also could be a great way of connecting with some candidates who have been coming to our webinars kind of consistently looking for help. So they're people who are really focused on their job search. And if you want to donate some time in answering some of the questions, it could be a good feeling at the very least. So I wanted to point that out too. So Alejandro will pop the Discord sign up in the chat, and I'll also include that in our follow-up email as well. So that's it. Thank you so much for being our first panelists. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone who's joined us today. And hope to see you the next time we do one of these.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Rachel. Thanks all.
Thank you all. Thank you. Ready to find your next role or discover top talent? Visit us at wellfound.com.